The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. So before we get started this week, I just want to put out a content warning. Because of higher education campuses having to deal with things like sexual assault, that does come up in our discussion this week and next. Also, we go into a fairly lengthy discussion of the following week about Eliza Lamb and the vanishing at the Cecil Hotel. So if you have little ears who are listening, you might want to listen to this one when they're in bed or something like that. We don't go into any graphic detail on any of these topics, but I just want to let anybody know who might feel that's happened to them, especially on a higher education campus, that we do mention that security guards do deal with these things on a regular basis. So just giving everybody a little heads up before we get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian and Miss Berlin for Breaking Down Security. Hey, so how are you doing this week? You weren't here last week, which, or the last couple weeks. So how was everything?
Wait, last couple weeks? Did I miss two of them?
Well, by the time Investigator Chick's podcast comes on, yes, you will have missed two.
I will have missed two? Crap.
Yes. That's how we do. That's how we do it here. So,
I mean, you got to leave the audience wanting more.
Yeah, your finite resource. Is that what it is?
I can only be stretched so thin.
I understand. Well,
I'm doing good, man.
Cool.
Had a good.
Well, I'm glad you're back.
Non-working weekend, so.
Oh well, I started my new job about 3 weeks ago, and I feel like I still need to work on weekends, which is sad. Yeah. So I'm still working that work-life balance thing. So, yeah. So Mr. Betcher is not here this week. He told me midweek that he was on a road trip with his children and wife to God knows where in Texas. And we hope that he drives safely and gets back here in a couple weeks for another episode. So
in a couple weeks, when I'm driving for spring break, I'm just going to call in from the road like I did last time.
Wait, where are you going? Where are you going for spring break?
South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
In the middle of nowhere. Carolina? Nothing. Like I'm going literally to like a mountain in a nice cabin away from everything.
So you're in western South Carolina?
Yes.
Like where the Appalachians are? Okay.
Yes. Yeah. It's like right at the border of South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, and Tennessee.
Oh, wow. I'm hearing banjos.
I don't want to be near anybody, and it's near a lake, and yeah, it's going to be great.
Okay. Well, some people like to get away like that. I can completely understand, considering the year and a half that we've had. So, hope you enjoy yourself. And cool. All right. So I don't want to go back and forth with Miss Berlin. She's enjoyable to talk to, but we're not here to talk about vacations. We're here to talk about security.
Right.
So, so I want to welcome Leanna and Garrison to the show. Thank you for coming and talking to us this week.
You're so welcome.
Right on. So, Leanna, we'll start with you. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to be in the security industry, and then what it is you do for a living.
Well, let me do a little back and forth. As of now, I'm the founder of Reparations.tech. So that's a project that I'll be working on, basically training BIPOC and disabled individuals in reference to using OSINT for good to basically help identify, missing and unidentified individuals. But previously, before I got to all of this, I was working at Nova Southeastern University, and I was working in the public safety department for about 4 years of my life. And while I was going to school there, while I was working there, I was across the street going to school for information technology. And as I heard a little bit more about cybersecurity, I was hooked. But unfortunately, things didn't happen the way that they were supposed to happen. So I left IT and I left cyber. I left physical security, did a little bit of project management and construction. And ironically, it was actually coronavirus that took me back home. So I hopped in my car and drove 19 hours straight back to South Florida. And I'm like, all right, it's no time but now to figure this out. So I went to the internet and I just started doing my thing, started doing my research on Twitter, and ironically, it was Tanya Jonka with a hashtag Cyber Mentoring Monday, where I met my mentor who pretty much took me under her wing and spoke to me, just about my previous experience in physical security, not realizing that physical security was a facet of cybersecurity. So now what I do in my day-to-day, my day-to-day activities when I'm not resting is really trying to educate people about the different facets of cybersecurity. A lot of people think that, oh, well, just cybersecurity is just computers. It's not. In order for you to understand cybersecurity, you have to understand that information security comes before it. If you're using information security, you're protecting all of your assets, which means if you're amplifying physical security, then you're practicing infosec. And if you're practicing infosec, you're going to eventually practice cybersecurity.
Nice.
So now I'm here.
Excellent. All right. Garrison, same question for you. How did you get to be in infosec and security, and what's your day job like?
Well, ironically, this whole infosec field is very new to me. I've actually been introduced to it by Liana, actually. Liana and I came in contact with each other through our mutual jobs at Nova Southeastern University for the Public Safety Department. I have 14, 15 years of experience there before I left a year and a half ago, and now I'm in safety and risk management. But before that, while I was at Nova, before I even met Liana and all that, the department is broken down into 4 different divisions, just to expound on them a bit more. You have the administrative division, you have the physical security division, you have field operations, and you have communications. Up until when I left Nova, I was the only employee that was trained in all 4 divisions. Right. I started out in field operations as a public safety officer. Was stationed was assigned to a building, the library, which is one of the largest libraries in South Florida. And I worked in there for about maybe 6 months before I got transferred to the road and became a patrol officer. And that's where I ran into one of my bosses. He actually headed up the physical security division, the Locksmith department. And I had an interest for it because I'm naturally, don't give me a book, I'll fall asleep real quick. This is how I learn things. I'm one of those guys that are physical,
Nice.
And I like to work with my hands. So I went into that department and started learning everything at an accelerated rate. Everything from typical lock picking to picking the door on a car, picking locks on a door, filing cabinet, keypad, whatever, electronic security, the whole 9 yards. I worked in that department for about 2.5 years before I got promoted to a lieutenant and went back to the field operations department, which is where I actually met Liana and had a little bit to do with her training. Not much, but a little bit of something.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. And then towards the end of my tenure there, I started training the rookies. And I finished up my time there. So I think I kicked out maybe about 3 or 4 classes of new officers and training them for everything that I knew, which I wasn't the best at it, but whatever I knew, I made it a point to pass it on to them.
Okay.
A friend of mine who was an officer there, I don't know if you remember Chantel, Deanna.
Before my time.
All right. Okay. Well, she actually was the one who got me my new job. You know, she has a friend that was looking for help because she was overwhelmed. And that's how I got into safety and risk. And pretty much my safety part of my education is what got me the job. You know, that I'm still learning the whole risk management part of it. But you know, as far as the safety entity is concerned, you know, that my current boss relies on me for that kind of information. So yeah, that's just me in a nutshell.
Very nice.
Okay. So you mentioned public safety, which is not necessarily law enforcement. So you're talking about physical security. Public safety is like, I don't want to say security guard, but I mean your safety for building safety and resource safety.
Think of it this way: we were the equivalent of a police service aide. You know, we were not considered security. As a matter of fact, when I first got the job there, the guy that was the head of the department, he was the executive director for protective services. You know, if he heard anybody refer to us as a security guard, it was your ass instantly, no questions asked. You know, he made it a point to stress that we were not security guards. You know, even though our functions do lie hand in hand with typical security work and all that, but you know, we were somewhere between a police service aide and an actual police officer. You know, we did the same type of investigations that a police officer does. We worked hand in hand with the police officers for Davie Police Department. We actually had about 4 of them that were permanently assigned to the campus, and we worked hand in hand, you know, with them as far as conducting investigations that included anything from death of a person, rape, criminal mischief, auto burglary, theft, you know, pretty much the same stuff that police officers did. The only difference was we did not walk around with a protective vest. We didn't have a taser and we didn't have a gun. And the only reason why that was the case is because the president of the university did not deem it necessary. Right? We didn't have no active shooter situations there as of yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, that's cool. Yeah, so when sorry to go back here, but back in old timey days when I was getting my CISP, we had 10 domains, and one of those was physical security. And I was in the Navy and I stood watch. And one of the things that I did when I was standing watch was I had to go to 3 different buildings. I had to make sure that safes that contained classified material was secured, had to make sure that they were signed out properly at the end of the day. I did have to check all of the door handles. I didn't check every door handle because touching 150 door handles made me feel a little odd. And so I
See, that's how you lose your job, Brian. You don't touch all the door handles.
Yeah.
See, right there. Yeah, you would have been fired. Fired.
I used my elbow.
We looked at them. They looked all right.
Yeah, it was shut. I mean, you walk around, you test a couple doorknobs.
How many officers did we hear say that, Leanna, before they lost their jobs?
Oh my God, no. Man, I could give you guys a running list. So many officers, they thought it was a joke. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with cyber.
Is it getting hot here?
Out.
You like him the hot seat here? Oh my God. I'm sorry,
better turn on the fan.
Sorry, Kevin Swakos. Sorry. But yeah, so I used that 3 years of watch standing as part of my 5 years. So, it's interesting, physical security, because there's a lot to know. I did hospital audits, and you had to know things like camera angles, and you had to, I walk into a hospital, I'm like, why is the camera pointing in the opposite direction? And they're like, oh yeah, in a hostage situation, they want to see the face of the person who's leaving the hospital, not as they're coming in, or when you see somebody going out the door, you don't want to see the back of their head, you want to see the front of their head. So I was like, oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, I can definitely understand a lot of what y'all are talking talking about, and and I can sympathize with the need to have that position of trust and what you're working on. So, what would you? So you mentioned specialized buildings like medical facilities. Obviously, I can see that. Library. What was in the library?
The library, well, the campus was, it was a private university, but certain buildings on the campus were open to the public. The library was one of them because they had a joint coalition with Broward County Libraries Association. So that's actually how the officers and supervisors for public safety got paid. We didn't actually get paid through the university. We got paid through Broward County, right? Okay. And we because of that, there was a separate set of policies and procedures that we had to abide by, as well as public safety's policies and procedures, right? But yeah, it was, a lot of people thought the building was a joke, right? But when you're dealing with people that come in there to look at pornography, child pornography, regular pornography, the whole stinking 9 yards, and your head is on a swivel as you're doing your patrols because they're slick. As soon as they see a uniform coming, they have that thing set up where that browser drops and you don't know what's going on. Something else pops up, it's funny because I ended up having to write the policy and procedure manual on how to handle situations like that for the library, right? And all that. And it's one of the situations where when I got promoted and got assigned to that area, we actually had a new vice president that took over for the library at the time, and she was really, really strict. She didn't believe in our approach. She thought we were a little bit too strong-armed, that we were intimidating to the people and all that. She actually argued with me that, what we call porn, right, someone else would call art. And I could go on into a different discussion with that as to what, my argument with her was with that. But eventually what helped me win the battle with her with that, so we could do our jobs in conjunction with David PD, was using the technology policy from the IT department, as well as the law that's written from a police perspective, and I was able to shut her down and all that. And, so we as public safety and David PD could do our jobs in the building. And it was rampant. When I first took it over, it's like we were catching at least 5 to 8 guys, most of them elderly, which was shocking, but I learned to overcome that shock real quick. But it's when I first started there, it took me and my officers, most of my officers were actually people that were working overtime, and it actually took me about 3 to 5 months to get the building under control with the madness that was going on in there. We had the pornography issue. We had people that were coming in there and, stealing the video games, stealing the Blu-ray movies and all that kind of stuff. And, we were combating several different situations at the same time.
Okay. Okay. So, one of the things that I think we want to talk about, and you've mentioned several scenarios here that theft and people misusing school resources and what have you. So Liliana, you and Garrison must have had to create some standard operating procedures in this case. Maybe, I hate to use like the jump to conclusions, Matt, but I mean, there must be a flow, you're, assess and doing those things. And what does the standard operating procedure look like at a university when you're talking about physical security controls? I mean, is there a specific way to engage people if you notice they're doing something and
Yes.
it
Yes.
build from
Yes.
that? Okay,
Yes.
so
Yes.
what's
Yes.
what's
And
the
yes.
standard? What starts out? What's the standard, response, or, for an issue that starts?
Before I can even answer that question, I'm going to tell you that there is no standard when you're dealing with physical security in reference to an educational setting. The thing that's most important, and I will, I'll go back and forth between physical security and cybersecurity for this, but for both industries, you need to be aware of situational awareness. You have to know what it is, and you have to know when to use it. Because if you're not aware of the situation, you can go into an incident and you can mess it up. I could, for example, I'll tell you about a quick story that I had. I got a call for a suicidal student. And normally when we get calls for suicidal students, we will have the police come and accompany us. And I had to make a decision after I had gathered intelligence that the student had had negative experiences with the police before. And I said, okay, I could either put myself, the police officers, and the student in danger by going by what normally is my protocol, or I can tell the police officers to stand down, let me go about it, which was hard because they did not want to listen to me, and go in with school staff and myself and talk to the student first. When you're dealing with emotions, adrenaline, and pressure, you can't articulate that down on paper. And when you're working in various settings, in various departments, whether you're in cyber, you're in IT, or you're in physical security, it takes a certain level of tact, and it takes a certain type of language that you have to use, where you'll have certain frameworks and certain security controls. When I say frameworks, it's really just like common sense, make sure that you're identifying the individuals, XYZ amount of way. These are our procedures XYZ. But a lot of your real life experience, that can't be put down on paper. That is with your, what we call, our tabletop exercise when we do our training with our officers. I can give you everything by the book, but I think that it's also important that we take our students and our staff out and we speak to them about what's going on in the community. The best SOP for any type of industry that you're going to use is one that's community oriented. You have to talk to every single person in your organization from some sort of level. You cannot just have people from the top up saying, well, we want these doors to be closed at this time. That's great. But what about the after school folks? What about the deliveries that come in? What about the cleaning crew? So you have to sit down and say, okay, I have to use A, my common sense, B, I have to look within the protocols that are there, and then C, I have to make sure that I'm using real life examples and stories when I'm doing my training to really educate people as to why we have certain things that are and are not on paper. Because you can't put everything on paper, Brian. Right. You can't.
And regarding that kind of training, have you seen any is there a big difference between situational awareness that you've seen in training in physical security versus cybersecurity? Has there been bad situational awareness training or anything really good that sticks out?
The thing about physical security and situational awareness on my end, Amanda, is that a lot of our training was in-house, but our best training was always by folks that gave us real life examples and explained the why behind it, whether it was physical security or cybersecurity. When I have a why and I can understand why things are made the way that they are or how they came to be, I have a greater sense of appreciation for them. And a lot of times when we used to have our officers and our students and even our staff members, Gary can attest to that, when people actually understood why we were doing the things that we were doing. Why were we locking up the library? Why were we announcing that the library is going to close in 15 minutes and then public safety is going to come and do a sweep and then we're going to come back and do another sweep? Why is that important? It's to let you know that there's a routine. It's to not alarm you. A lot of students in the libraries, they like to walk around or they like to sit with their headphones on. they'll be afraid and they'll be startled if they see someone in uniform tapping them on the shoulder late at night saying, hey, you got to get out of here. You know, understanding that you have to have a certain amount of awareness for a situation and knowing that you're also going to be in contact with different kinds of people, you know, in physical security and in cybersecurity. You're going to deal with all types of people. You can't put that down on paper, Amanda. That's just where you have to sit down with your people. And if you're going to train people, train them on stuff like this. This is what we need on both sides of the spectrum.
Right. It sounds like a lot of what you try to teach people is not to escalate, but to, try to de-escalate as much as possible. Try not to, cause there to be any, any reason to, have that kind of,
exasperated response. Correct. That's what we want at the end of the day, because if you're, this is a university, you're dealing with, children, adults, the elderly, folks from various socioeconomical backgrounds. Gary, you've seen it more than I have, more than anywhere else on that campus, because you had a public library. So you never know the temperament of the individual that you could possibly be dealing with. You don't know if the person's from Florida. You don't know where this person's from, what this person's been through, or what kind of day that they're having. You want to de-escalate the situation, and you have to understand what escalation management is and when to use it. You don't have to call the big chief for everything. You can put out some of your own fires.
Right. A lot of what you and Garrison have been talking about reminds me of the book Talking to Strangers from Malcolm Gladwell that I'd listened to audiobook. He actually read his own book in audio form, and he added a bunch of additional things like interviews and such. And some of the stuff he talked about in there is when you talk to people, you kind of have an idea in your head of how they're going to react to you because of what you project upon them. So there was a number of different things that they talked about. One of them was the CIA and Fidel Castro fooling the CIA the entire time. Back in the 1960s, Neville Chamberlain believing that he could trust Adolf Hitler. Talking about why campus sexual assaults are on the rise. And there's a number of different things there. They also talk about Sandra Bland, of course, in great depth. And I heard his episode of revisionist history on that one as well. It was very sad. And how things just kind of, escalated out of control in that case. But, I think it is important to understand how to de-escalate properly and to not, assume that, that everybody knows your intent when you're working in physical security. And I don't mean just from a technical point of view, because, everybody thinks about the surveillance state and what have you, but, sometimes cameras are just there to help protect everybody, not just to spy on you in this case. And I know a lot of people in InfoSec feel that way. It's like, surveillance state or whatever, but it's like, we have to protect people somehow. And you can't, expect people to police themselves. And sometimes the only way to do that is to have controls in place to do so. And I definitely appreciate the complexity that y'all have there. So according to this, and so the show notes, a lot of it was given by Leanna here, which was great. You say that there's no NIST standard for physical security. I find that hard to believe. Why isn't there? I mean, they have frameworks for everything else.
Here's the thing. They let, before we have some people come after me and say, oh, I don't know what I'm talking about. Let me give context now for the sake of the type of training as far as what we were doing as far as in-house security. In-house physical security training. We didn't touch anything as far as a NIST framework. No one knows of an 800-SP53. There's none of that. But if you put some of these people around doors with keys and locks, they can tell you how to get into a door. They can tell you where to hide, okay? I have worked with some brilliant folks. You can put them anywhere on that campus. They'll go hide. You cannot find them.
You will never find them.
You will never find them. And here's the thing about that. That's a talent in itself. A lot of people don't understand, when you do physical security assessment or physical, when you do that physical penetration testing, you've got some people that cannot tell you what a framework or a control is. But I promise you, they can out-hide your best pen tester out there. That's the hilarious part about it, Brian.
I can definitely understand that. And I mean, I've seen Twitter threads where people have been like, oh, I'm going to go ahead and try to get into this site. I forget the Twitter threads, but I do remember reading them to great extent where it's like, she got in, by, making everyone think she was pregnant, or, she was able to get into really secure areas by doing so. Yeah, I mean, and hiding is, in some of those buildings have been, built back in the 1900, early 1900s. So there's a lot of nooks and crannies and steam pipes and, voids and areas where they could hide for that stuff.
That was our show for this week. You can find show notes for this and all of our shows at www.breakingsecurity.com. You can also find an RSS link on the site to add to your favorite podcatcher. You can find all of us on Twitter. Miss Berlin can be found at InfoSyster, INFOSYSTIR. Mr. Betcher can be found at BetcherPwned, BOETTCHERPWNED. And you can follow me on Twitter at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We have a Slack. Come join us on our Slack. A lot of great things going on there, a lot of channels of various InfoSec-related subjects. You can get an invite on Twitter by emailing our official Twitter handle for the show at BrakeSec, BRAKESEC, or you can email us at bds.podcast@gmail.com. Thank you to all of our Patreon supporters for their monetary assistance by offsetting costs involved in putting out a weekly show. Zoom fees, Libsyn hosting, domain purchase, renewal, equipment upgrades, time and effort building the community we have. We appreciate all of your help and support. If you'd like a t-shirt, stickers, coffee mug, or just to show your support for the show, you can check out our TPub site, www.tpublic.com/user/BDS podcast. We thrive on your feedback. A quick 5-star comment on iTunes or Google Play Store or your favorite streaming service, Spotify, Pandora, what have you, go a long way to gaining us additional visibility. It takes no time at all, and we appreciate your help in spreading the word. That was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Be safe, be well, be kind to one another. Take care of yourself because you're the only you have, and we'll talk to you again soon.